Childhood should be a time of laughter, learning and play. However, for millions of children around the world, this idyllic vision is shattered by the harsh realities of child labor. Child labor robs children of their education, their health and their futures. It is a complex issue, often rooted in poverty and lack of opportunity. Understanding the scope of this problem is the first step toward eradicating it. Child labor takes many forms, from toiling in dangerous factories to working long hours in agriculture. These children are often subjected to hazardous conditions, physical abuse, and emotional trauma. Their families, trapped in a cycle of poverty, may see child labor as their only option for survival. This creates a heartbreaking dilemma where the very survival of the family seems dependent on the exploitation of a child. The consequences of child labor are far-reaching. Children forced into work are denied their right to education, perpetuating the cycle of poverty. They are more susceptible to injuries, illnesses, and long-term health problems. The psychological toll can be equally devastating, leading to anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. Breaking this cycle requires a multifaceted approach that addresses both the symptoms and root causes of child labor. Child labor casts a long shadow over numerous industries worldwide. From the cocoa plantations of West Africa to the garment factories of Southeast Asia, children are being exploited for their cheap labor and vulnerability. The global demand for low-cost goods fuels this exploitation, making consumers unwitting participants in this system. One industry notorious for child labor is agriculture. Children as young as 5 work long hours in fields, harvesting crops, spraying pesticides, and tending to livestock. The work is physically demanding and often dangerous, exposing children to toxic chemicals and hazardous tools. The cocoa industry, responsible for our beloved chocolate, is particularly plagued by child labor, with an estimated 2 million children working in cocoa production in West Africa alone. The garment industry is another major culprit. Fast fashion's insatiable appetite for cheap clothing has created a race to the bottom, with factories in developing countries exploiting child labor to keep costs low. Children sew garments, stitch buttons and package clothes, often working in cramped, poorly ventilated spaces. The long hours, low wages and hazardous conditions trap these children and their families in a cycle of poverty. The sex industry is perhaps the darkest manifestation of child exploitation. Children, particularly girls, are trafficked and forced into prostitution, enduring unimaginable physical and emotional abuse. This heinous crime robs children of their innocence, their dignity, and their future. Combating child sex trafficking requires a concerted global effort to disrupt trafficking networks, protect vulnerable children, and provide support for survivors. The concept of childhood, while seemingly universal, is not monolithic. Cultural norms, historical context, and legal frameworks all contribute to how childhood is defined and experienced around the world. This variation complicates efforts to address child labor, as what constitutes childhood and work can vary significantly. In many Western societies, childhood is associated with education, play, and protection from adult responsibilities. Children are seen as vulnerable and in need of nurturing and guidance. This perspective is reflected in legal frameworks that establish minimum working ages, restrict the types of work children can perform, and mandate compulsory education. However, even within these societies, historical context reveals a different picture. In many developing countries, the lines between childhood and adulthood are often blurred. Economic hardship and cultural norms may dictate that children contribute to the family income from a young age. Tasks such as fetching water, collecting firewood, or helping with household chores are often seen as essential contributions to the family's well-being rather than exploitative labor. This distinction is crucial in understanding the complexities of child labor and crafting culturally sensitive solutions. Section 4, A Necessary Evil, Examining Acceptable Forms of Child Work. The debate surrounding child labor is often polarized, with some advocating for its complete abolition and others arguing for a more nuanced approach. While all forms of exploitative child labor are unequivocally wrong, there is a gray area when it comes to certain types of work that children may engage in. In many cultures, children participate in family businesses or contribute to household chores. These activities, when conducted within reasonable limits and without jeopardizing the child's health or education, can be seen as a form of socialization and skill building. For instance, a child helping in a family-owned shop after school may gain valuable work experience and business acumen. However, a clear distinction must be drawn between these forms of acceptable work and exploitative child labor. Work that is harmful to the child's physical or mental well-being, interferes with their education or deprives them of their childhood is unacceptable. Factors such as the type of work, the number of hours worked, the working conditions, and the child's age and maturity level must all be considered. Section 5A, Bridging the Gap, Child Labor and Economic Disparity. The root causes of child labor are complex and intertwined, but one factor stands out: poverty. For impoverished families struggling to survive, putting their children to work can seem like the only option. This heartbreaking reality underscores the urgent need to address the economic disparities that fuel child labor. Creating economic opportunities for families is essential to breaking the cycle of poverty and child labor. This includes promoting fair wages, providing access to education and vocational training, and supporting small businesses and entrepreneurship. When parents have viable alternatives to support their families, they are less likely to rely on their children's labor. Investing in education is paramount. Education empowers children with knowledge, skills, and opportunities, enabling them to break free from the chains of poverty. By providing free, quality education to all children, we can equip them with the tools they need to create a brighter future for themselves and their communities. Section 6, a call to action, protecting the promise of childhood. Every child deserves a childhood filled with joy, learning, and boundless possibilities. Eradicating child labor is not just a moral imperative, it is an investment in a brighter future for all. We must all do our part to protect the rights of children and create a world where every child can reach their full potential. As consumers, we can make ethical choices by supporting companies that prioritize fair labor practices and avoid products tainted by child labor. We can advocate for stricter regulations and enforcement of existing laws prohibiting child labor, and we can support organizations working on the ground to provide education, healthcare, and economic opportunities for vulnerable families. The fight against child labor is a collective responsibility. Governments, businesses, civil society organizations, and individuals must work together to create a world where every child is free to learn, play, and dream. Let us join hands and raise our voices to protect the promise of childhood for all.